Okay. I kind of think that, to some degree, what we are seeing from Donald Trump right now is sort of what we expected. The strange obsessions and the constant bluster and the wild pronouncements, none of that is anything really that new. There was also the talk about taking over Greenland and Canada and the Panama Canal. There was the short-lived trade war with nothing to show for it. There was the decision just yesterday to strip security clearances from people he doesn't like. There was the third-person announcement that he's appointing himself chairman of the Kennedy Center. And I could go on and on and on, but I'm not going to. The point is, if you have been following Donald Trump for the last decade, and many of you I know have been, this is all very much what you might expect from a Trump 2.0. And I guess this continuation of the Trump show is, on some level, what a slight majority of the American people may have voted for. I don't know. But what you may not have bargained for, what they may not have bargained for, and I certainly didn't, is what I'm going to call Musk 1.0. I actually think it's safe to say people were not prepared for the way Trump has basically ceded his power. There's a reason. Time magazine's latest cover shows Musk sitting in the Oval Office behind the Resolute desk. And I'm just going to leave that up there for a second because why not? And because over the past few weeks, Elon Musk has elbowed his way into nearly every corner of the government, shuttering agencies, firing employees, gaining access to the sensitive personal data belonging to millions of Americans. In an interview that's going to air later today, Trump said he's not done yet.
I'm going to tell him very soon, like maybe in 24 hours, to go check the Department of Education. He's going to find the same thing. Then I'm going to go to the military. Let's check the military. We're going to find billions, hundreds of billions of dollars of fraud and abuse. And, the people elected me on that.
Did they really? Did the American people really elect you to let Elon Musk do what he's doing? Because it turns out the American people don't love it. A new poll out just this morning shows that just 23% of all Americans say they want Musk to have a lot of influence over government operations and spending. And boy, does he seem to have a lot of influence. And this dissatisfaction isn't just showing up in polls. It's also showing up in real life. We saw protests all across the country this week, and big ones here in Washington. Like this protest you can see on the screen from the country's largest federation of unions. When workers caught wind that Musk planned to show up at the Department of Labor on Wednesday, intending to shut it down, hundreds of people, you can see them there, gathered on the building steps, ready to meet him. Guess what? He never showed up. People are also lighting up the phone lines of congressional offices, many of them fed up with Elon Musk, what he's doing. Of course they are. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said the usual call volume coming into the Senate is about 40 calls a minute. But right now, it's 1,600 calls a minute. Independent Senator Angus King said he's been hearing from constituents constantly about Doge and Musk, and that his office can hardly pick up the phones fast enough. Democratic Senator Tina Smith put it like this: it's a deluge on Doge. According to the New York Times, an aide for Republican Senator John Curtis estimated that about 60% of the calls coming into his office were critical of Musk, while the other 40% concerned Trump's nominees. As the Times reports, Congresswoman Becca Balint has reassigned at least 6 additional staff members to keep up with a nonstop flood of calls about Doge's access to personal and private information. And listen, I can definitely see why someone might want to pick up the phone to ask about that. They should. So yeah, we are seeing dissatisfaction in the polls. We're seeing it in protests all across the country. And perhaps most importantly, we are seeing pushback in the courts. On Friday, a federal judge ordered the Trump administration to stop some aspects of its attempt to shut down USAID. And overnight on Friday, another federal judge temporarily blocked the Doge crew from accessing sensitive Treasury Department payment systems. And of course, Musk already seems to be suggesting he may defy that order. And a lot of this is happening in the courts and in the streets and in Congress because of Trump's decision to let Elon Musk do basically whatever he wants. Now, Trump, of course, isn't blameless in all this. I'm not suggesting that. He chose to empower Musk, and he's watching it all happen without objection. But right now, he's not really the main character. Heading into the new administration, we had this guiding light, at least I did, this core principle. Watch what Trump does, not what he says. Don't get distracted by that. But at least right now, I think we have to make a bit of a revision. Right now, we need to watch what Musk does, not what Trump says. And what he's doing is genuinely concerning and alarming. But the good news is that everyone from the courts to the Congress to the American people are watching. And for the most part, they don't seem to like what they see. And joining me now is Democratic Senator Cory Booker of New Jersey. Okay, Senator, there is so much I want to get to with you, but I just want to start. I've been reflecting on the last couple of weeks, as I know you have been, and you've been very busy. I think Trump's approach so far this term aspects of it seem kind of predictable. But to me, what Elon Musk is doing right now isn't entirely what I anticipated. Has anything surprised you about his actions?
I mean, I think what has surprised me is the complicity of my Republican colleagues who often have been champions of these ideas of privacy. This is Elon Musk, who is one of our biggest government contractors, one of our big military contractors, who now has unfettered access to the most personal information, from FEMA information about people's homes, houses, to medical information, information on the medicines people take, tax information, Social Security information. And get this, we are in a time of AI. People are saying, oh, it's just read-only. He can still scrape data, get pattern recognition, get predictive analytics, feed it into AI models, and what he can do is simply revolutionary by having access to the information. Its value on the open market, because other contractors would love to have this, is billions of dollars. There's no oversight, there's no checks, there's no transparency to what he's doing, and you hear crickets from Republicans. You hear silence. And so this is offensive to Americans. This is violative of values we hold sacrosanct, like our private personal information should not be for a very conflicted contractor. So this is one of these things that to me is astonishing. And we're going to continue to fight him in court because I think he is violating privacy, violating the law by having access to this kind of sensitive data. And it's something that we all as Americans should be shouting down and stopping.
No question about it. And thank you for outlining exactly how it will impact people, because this is not just something that's happening within the walls of Washington. This is going to impact millions of people across the country. You just mentioned the fight in the courts, and there has been certainly some successes in pushing back on Musk in the courts. Over the weekend, there has been a couple of actions, but he tweeted last night or retweeted a message last night suggesting he should defy court orders. The Democrats, you have been very vocal, but the Democrats are in the minority in the Senate. You mentioned the Republicans have been quiet like crickets. What happens if he defies it?
Well, then we really do have a constitutional crisis. It's where our separations of powers, our checks and balances, that he starts more and more, we're seeing this, wanting to be autocratic or dictatorial. We see this in other countries when a executive power starts to overreach their authority, and he is, by the way, doing things that are spelled out as Congress's duties. And then when the courts stop him, how we've settled things from the Reagan administration to the Obama administration, to defy court orders brings about a constitutional crisis. And so what Elon Musk is saying there is that we should not be a nation of three branches of government with checks and balances. We should be an authoritarian dictatorship, and that should scare everyone, because that's when democracies begin to unravel. We must check him. We must hold them up. We must stop them, and we must use every means necessary in a nonviolent way to do what is necessary to stop him from turning our democracy into what we're seeing in other governments like Russia's.
We've seen some significant efforts to push back over the course. There's been protests across the country, here in Washington, D.C. as well. We've seen congressional Democrats push back. We watched your effort to hold the Senate floor overnight this week in opposition of Trump's OMB director, Russ Vought, who did eventually get through. But I know you said this morning that you guys are going to do whatever it takes. You just kind of reiterated that to stop Donald Trump. For people watching right now, what does that mean specifically? What does that look like? What specific things can they look out for?
Yeah, well, let me just give the nod to the fact that elections matter, You know, if we had picked up one more Senate seat, for example, 20,000 votes in Pennsylvania, we could have stopped Hegseth from being, because remember, 3 Republicans went. So every congressional seat, every Senate seat, people don't think it at the time. That's the time we really need people leaning in, because the consequences for that we're seeing right now. We do not control the House, and we're in a minority in the Senate, and we don't control the White House. That gives them tremendous power, even within the bounds of how our democracy is supposed to work. But that does not mean we are powerless, that we don't have agency. Democrats are going to fight in 4 ways. One is in the courts. We've discussed that already. Over 42 cases have been filed. We've won over a dozen of them already, and we're going to continue to fight him in the courts. The next 2 ways are legislatively and using our oversight power. Senators do have power in the forms of our procedure and our oversight to just slow things down, to force people to take a look at it. Kash Patel's a great example. Just by postponing his floor vote over a week, we've seen more information coming out, like him receiving thousands and thousands of dollars from a Russian-implicated news agency that literally he took money from, that has done other documentaries that are pro-Putin and more. And so that's very important for us to be able to slow things down, get a deeper look, to be able to provide oversight. But the last thing that we have to do, the 4th bucket, that's not only something that we have an obligation to do, but every American does, is to shine a light, to elevate, to communicate, to talk about what's going. I am very happy this last week that Democratic senators have had millions of more engagement with their content online, that it's exposing what the Trump administration is doing. And why do I know this works? Well, the collective voice of outrage during his first administration stopped him from pulling down the Affordable Care Act and people's health care, people with pre-existing conditions and others. And I know it works this time because just 2 weeks ago, when Donald Trump froze federal spending to programs like ones that give funding for our police officers and our firefighters, or suicide prevention hotlines, or feeding programs for our elderly, there was such a public outrage and so much content was elevated online that the Trump administration stopped in their tracks, and then the law kicked in and we were able to get an injunction against him doing that. All of the buckets of our work in coordination to be a bulwark against what he's going to do. But I return to where I started. They won multiple elections and they have a lot more authority. But that does not mean we are powerless, that we don't have agency. And most importantly, all of us, especially us elected, but all of us have a responsibility in this time and this climate to speak up, to stand up, to be activists against these kind of illegal actions of the Trump administration.
Senator Cory Booker, always a pleasure talking to you. Thank you so much for joining me.